Our moderator today is Paul Harris. We will have a presentation called Past, Present, Future, Sustainable Resource Development over the next 30 years. So I will turn it over to Paul to do your formal introductions, and we look forward to the wonderful next session.
Hello and welcome everybody to this panel. We've got a lot of good talent on the call today. In no particular order, we have Aidan Davy, Chief Operating Officer of ICMM, which is the International Council of Mining and Metals, Clive Johnson, President and CEO of B2Gold, Peter Montano, VP of Projects at B2Gold, and Catherine Farrow, who is CEO of Farex Geomine Limited, Chair of Rethink Mining Ventures, and a director of several companies. My name is Paul Harris, and I'm the America's editor of Mining Journal. I also organize the CGS conferences in Colombia and Ecuador. We've got a lot of good talent on the call today, a lot of experience. So let's start off by everybody taking a couple of minutes to introduce yourselves and telling us how you came to work in the mining sector. Okay, well, let's move on to Clive Johnson then, please.
Hey, Paul. Good to see everyone. I'm very pleased to be part of this. And as you said, we have Peter Montano as well from the B2Gold group. Quick history. It's a long one, so I'll make it quite brief. But I've been in the gold mining industry for over 40 years, starting off an exploration contractor in my university years, working up in the Yukon and northern British Columbia, and line cutting, claim staking, expediting, all those types of things. And that's where I started in the industry. And we just kept going and decided to go public in the early 80s to try that instead of being contractors. We created a few junior companies, and we merged them together in 1989 to form Bema Gold. And Bema Gold was a pretty successful company in building a mine in Idaho and then going down to Chile and ultimately having a gold mine in South Africa and building a gold mine in the far east of Russia. And that led to the discovery at a very low gold price, $200 gold, when we went to Russia. And that led to the discovery of Kupol, which was a very rich, extraordinarily rich gold and silver deposit in Chukotka in northeast Russia. We were victims of our own success, and then Kinross came knocking and offered a $3.5 billion deal to our shareholders to replace our shares with theirs. That's not what management wanted, but I don't believe in being entrenched management, so we took it to our shareholders. And that gave us a chance to, and Kinross did a good job with the Russian assets. We were 2/3 of the way through building it when they took us over, so our crew stayed. We built our own mines and built it. And then we started B2Gold at zero 15 years ago. So since that time, we put up some of our own money and just decided to see if we could do it again. And at the end of the day, we've now are a 1 million ounce a year producer with operating gold mines in Namibia, Mali, and the Philippines, and a pretty impressive portfolio of growth projects. Very low cost producer, very cash rich, paying the biggest dividend in the gold space. So that's kind of where we are today, looking to continue to grow the company from our existing assets, but also looking at the possibilities of M&A, and we're trying to find willing dance partners who are interested in combining with us to make a bigger, better company. So my experience is probably a bit unique, and I definitely started in exploration and actually exploration contracting work. And then I guess it came to me to understand how to go public in Vancouver way back in the day, how to raise money legitimately and put together a good package of exploration projects. And that's how we started twice in exploration, both in Bema and B2Gold. And as most of you are aware, that's a very unusual thing. Most exploration companies, the few that actually succeed because it's so hard to find gold in economic quantities, the few that succeed should not try, in my mind, to build a mine. They should be taken over in a friendly way, hopefully, by companies that can build mines. That's kind of the norm of the history of our industry. And I find that most producers aren't that really good at exploration, frankly, especially from the grassroots perspective. So we were born of exploration. We managed to transition to become a respected builder of mines and operator of mines, and all the things that go with that over the years. But I think it gives us a little bit of a different approach in this industry, because we are very agile, we're very entrepreneurial, and I probably wouldn't be doing this today after all these years if we weren't entrepreneurial. We're very good at the bricks and mortars, as you can see, about how we mine and how we are so committed to CSR and ESG, and have been doing that for a very long time. But it's the entrepreneurial side that I find still is great for an upside, and I think our shareholders really get that. So Peter, when Peter talks, he can talk a little bit more about some of the CSR things, but I know we'll have time to go back and forth here, so I won't take up much more time. We think we've been on the cutting edge of CSR and ESG before they had fancy titles decades ago, because we've taken a commitment, and I call it an extension of the Canadian culture. And everything we've done has been based on this principles of fairness, respect, and transparency in the way we treat all stakeholders. And that's one of the reasons why we've succeeded in politically challenging areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Clive. We'll get into a lot of those aspects in much more detail later on. Aidan, let's turn to you. Quick couple of minutes about who you are, how you came into the mining sector.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for the opportunity to be here to the LIAMforum. And apologies for my connectivity problems earlier, but it's great to be here. So I've got a background in environmental sciences and technology. I was part of that first generation, probably, at university that had the option of studying this at degree level. This is back in the early to mid 1980s. And during the course of that, one of the modules we had was on environmental impact assessment, which was kind of quite emerging as a discipline at that stage. And there was a character who came to talk to us by the name of Bill Dallas. And I remember being struck by Bill Dallas's name even before he arrived, because I grew up watching Westerns as a kid. Bill Dallas sounded like a gunslinger to me. And then this character arrives into the lecture theatre, larger than life, and he talks to us about the conduct of environmental impact assessment for a major resources project that was in Southern Ireland at that stage. And so this really intrigued me as a professional studying environmental sciences and technology. Fast forward about 18 months, when I'd finished my degree, I had the good fortune to be employed in an environmental consulting practice, and an even greater fortune to be employed to go out and spend 1 month in 3 doing an integrated environmental and social impact assessment of a major mining project in northern Malawi. And again, you know, I couldn't quite believe that somebody was paying me to do this. It felt like something I should be paying for the privilege and the opportunity to be there. But as a learning opportunity in an exploration camp for about a quarter of the year across the seasons, it really was, I think, the thing that really, for me anyway, opened my eyes to both the complexities and the challenges and the extraordinary opportunities of mining resource developments in emerging markets. So I spent a number of years in consulting, then went to work in industry for a couple of years, and then my journey into mining is a slightly indirect one, because I spent time working in the development assistance community with both the private and public sector arms of the World Bank. And one of the pieces of work I was doing with the World Bank was looking at the integration of environmental and social impacts assessments, but also the integration of social concerns into private sector decision-making. And the lens through which we looked at that was major natural resource development projects in the mining and oil and gas sectors. And again, had the privilege of visiting a number of these resource development projects in places like Venezuela, Papua New Guinea, and Bolivia and Colombia. And so, again, I think at that stage, mining has always been a constant throughout my career, but it re-engaged me in, again, the challenges and opportunities of the sector we work in. Fast forward a number of years through time in a not-for-profit working exclusively on sustainable development issues, and I find myself at ICMM, where I have the great privilege to be Chief Operating Officer with a portfolio kind of oversight of all the work we do in relation to environment and sustainability. And that's on matters related to environmental responsibility, social performance, governance. When I say governance, I'm talking about mineral resource governance as opposed to corporate governance, and also in the innovation space as well. So that was my journey into the mining area. And I think it's one of those sectors that, once you've dealt, as I have had the privilege of doing, with multiple other sectors, there's something about this sector that not just is intrinsically incredibly complex, but also intrinsically very interesting.
Thank you very much, Aidan. Catherine Farrow, please.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Such a unique conference. Really, really interesting. I guess what Brazil asked me to do is sort of think about when I was in first and second year as a geology student way back in the day. And in my case, you know, I was kind of a dumb jock. I went to play basketball, and I took geology while I was supposed to be doing a double major in chemistry and geology. And I liked chemistry, and I did well at it, but I really got into the geology. And you know, back then, my view of mining companies, they used to show up now and again and you know, maybe recruit a little bit, but then the wheels fell off the industry. This was in the 80s. Mining engineers, in my mind, mining engineers ran the companies, and geos just did exploration. And that was about the end of it. And I went on to grad school, and I got my PhD, and I was headed for the academic world. So, but then I realized I actually got married in school, and I realized I couldn't just move around and do postdocs and that kind of thing as I was married. And so I took a job with the Ontario government as a government geologist. And really that was sort of the first sort of non-academic, other than, you know, summer jobs and just kind of soil sampling and sampling things in rivers in northern New Brunswick and that kind of thing. And I really liked working on the rocks, but I realized that kind of wasn't for me. So I ended up working for Inco, and which was at the time Canada's largest nickel producer, with lots of mines in Sudbury and Indonesia and other parts of Canada, etc. So I spent quite a while at Inco, and I ran the process mineralogy lab. I ended up working a lot in mills and working with people solving problems in smelters and things like that. And then I got back into helping the exploration side and project evaluation and everything else. And I had a wonderful job there. I'm not really sure what my job was, but I certainly had fun. I got to investigate underground explosions and fires. I ended up on a team that did that. Fascinating several years at Inco, but then I decided I wanted to go and do something a little bit crazier, maybe with a junior, and get more involved on the exploration side, and ended up doing that. I was part of a company called FNX, and sort of worked my way through there, and through the M&A, we made several discoveries. We found and actually built in a brownfields camp several mines, and I did everything, right from, by the time the M&A sort of what was FNX took over, and it became various iterations. By the end of it all, I'd done technical services, I'd been a VP, I'd done exploration, we'd found mines, corporate development, project evaluation. I've been an EVP, an SVP, chief technology officer. I even, I spent a lot of time in operations at the time, and I ended up as a chief operating officer of KGHM International. We had 3 underground mines and 3 open pits on 2 different continents. So, you know, really, those first 25 years of my career were a lot of fun. Had just a hoot. Eventually, I became CEO of another company, a gold company, and got out of the copper sort of side of things. And you know, I guess when I look back and some of the things that I'm doing now, because now I'm working as a consultant in IT, if you can believe it, among other things. And you know what's amazing, and I really think Aidan and Clive touched on this, is the variety of opportunities. Who would have thought some academically oriented geology student would end up doing all this stuff? And I guess, you know, you talk to me and say, well, what were your greatest learnings? You know, it's like an interview, right? And then I would think, you know, back in the day, I thought, as I was very much a technical specialist, I thought, well, you know what? You solve problems in mining through technical success. And that was that. And those were the days back in Inco, and that was kind of the way I went around it. And then I realized, wait a minute, it's the people that matter. It took me a while, but I got there. You've got to have that empowerment. You've got to work with people to find solutions. And then that has to be a really collaborative space. As you find the solutions, you implement the solutions, you engage in that creativity. And that took me a few years, and I was into management and into operations at that time. But you know, at the end of the day, if I look at what the job, for example, of a CEO is, and I decided to use this example. I mean, several of us have either been CEOs or are CEOs, and really, you know, and my thinking that it had to be a certain discipline. It had to be mining engineers, for example, or those were what the chief operating officers used to be. The problem is, if you look at the job description of a CEO, you have to have a broad knowledge of technical issues. You have to understand project management, HR, finance, environmental, geopolitical, marketing, operations, IT and OT, and the rest of your company, and be a good listener and be a good communicator. So that doesn't seem like a one-off university course that covers all that. So it means that, like Aidan said, there's a huge opportunity here. So at this point, when I look back, and you would say, oh, well, Catherine, you know, I don't have a lot in common with you. And so I'm the mother of a mixed race family with an 18-year-old son. And I think about what he wants and what he's looking for in his university experience and what he's looking for in the future job. And the one thing is, he and I want the same thing. After 30 years in this industry, I want transparency. And I want openness, and I want a diverse workforce that looks like the population that it's serving. That's all he wants. And so we're not that different, even though, you know, I've had this experience and he hasn't. So anyway, you know, I think this is a really interesting discussion over the past two days. I think it's an amazing group of people. And I really think this is a unique way of sort of connecting with the younger crowd and helping them understand that we are accessible. And the final thing I'd like to leave you with is the mining industry, is it leading with respect to sustainability? We can have lots of conversations about the actual mining of a product and pulling it out, but I had something happen to me. I have to do a lot of director education style courses, and I took this course in this winter in sustainability litigation. Whole broad spectrum of people in industry who are into, and not just my industry, every industry from finance right through. But in the breakout discussions, the mining representatives, along with the people who were in utilities, let's say, had the broadest knowledge of the broader aspects of sustainability, from the socioeconomic and the technical aspects, right through to basic environmental issues. So I want to leave you with that, because I thought that was a really unique experience for somebody like me who feel we're always climbing up that hill. So anyway, over to somebody else.
Thank you, Catherine. And finally, Peter, who is, I think, the youngest person on our panel.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, obviously, I don't have quite the extensive story that those in front of me do, Clive and Catherine, but I have fallen in love with mining. I started as a civil engineer, and really in school, my thought was, you know, heavy construction is what I really liked. Roads, bridges, ports, you know, big infrastructure. And I had an opportunity coming out of university to travel with a civil engineering geotechnical company, and their specialty was mining services. So, you know, over the next few years, I spent more and more time working with mining, water control systems, tailings facilities, and just various infrastructure. And what I started to realize is that as a civil engineer in university and in internships and in construction, it's very much an inside the box. And there are some opportunities to push things, but it's very tightly controlled. And with mining, what happens is you're working with a natural system. So every project is different. You're working with different societies and different stakeholders. So the non-technical problems are always different. And that, you know, so I found myself going heavier and heavier towards the mining side and less towards the civil engineering side, to the point where eventually one of my clients, B2 Gold, became one of my best clients, scooped me up. And, you know, since then, I've been involved in not just mining, but in finance, management, working with local stakeholders, down to farmers associations in Namibia, tribal leaders in Mali. And it's been an amazing path to me that I have used everything that I learned in school, but I've also spent a massive amount of time reading and learning since then, because it is this massive industry. It's multidisciplinary, and that's really kept me motivated. So I've found it really interesting as my career has grown that there are areas that I've become very technically proficient in, but really it's that broad range and diversity that I found it fascinating. So it's a kind of a very short story there, but in Namibia, after working in Nicaragua for a while, building some of B2 Gold's first mines, obviously after Bima, went to Namibia, and the Otjikoto mine was something that it was a greenfield project, and it was one of those opportunities that as a young engineer, you don't get those opportunities outside of mining. It's very difficult. Whereas inside mining, it's a very personal responsibility. Let's design something, let's build it. We need to make something real. We don't live in the virtual world. So being able to have that opportunity was just very motivating for me, and has led on project to project since then. So now I find myself leading a project team and looking for the next projects, and seeing what we can do. It's been very fascinating, and I'm excited to see where B2 Gold and where I go from here.
Thank you very much, Peter. And finally, myself, I've been in and around the mining sector for about 25 years now. I did a business degree, then I did a postgraduate in publishing, and just happened to work. My first job was with a business-to-business publisher that just happened to have a mining title, and never looked back since. It's taken me to live in various different countries. I've written about environment, politics, law, promotion, science, of course, the mining industry, business and finance. So one thing I sort of summing up the collective comments here, there's a lot of diversity of experience. There's a lot of different career paths, and there is career progression. And I'd like to sort of take that into our first sort of discussion point. The purpose of this forum is to talk and to sort of show the appeal of the mining sector to a younger generation. So let's start off talking about mining embraces a number of different careers and professions, and there seems to be a clear possibility of career progression, coming at it from various different disciplines. So let's perhaps direct this question first to Aidan. ICMM, I guess you have a broad overview of industry trends. So let's talk about career progression, mining careers, and is there a shortage of skills? Does mining need new, fresh, young talent?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And look, I think the short answer is mining desperately needs fresh young talent. But also mining needs, more diverse talent. And I think Catherine touched on this point because, in some respects it's reflected in kind of the age profile in this planet of this panel, perhaps Peter accepted. But what you tend to see within the industry is we have an increasing trend towards people who are in the latter stages of their career, perhaps approaching retirement, especially in certain disciplines. And we also have a significant challenge around diversity, equity and inclusion. We still are probably running at somewhere between 13-15% of employment of women in the workforce. When you go to certain parts of the world, for some companies, brilliant on diversity, equity and inclusion. For others, we still see the local populations being significantly underrepresented, both in the broader workforce and in particularly management positions. So we've got work to do in that space. And so that I think is one tremendous area of opportunity, simply because we are going to need to attract many more people into the industry simply to serve the needs of the industry in its current state. But mining is changing, and it's changing very, very significantly. And so I think we've traditionally thought of mining as being a somewhat staid, a somewhat traditional, reliant on technologies, many of which are simply variations on technological methods and approaches that have been in existence for hundreds of years. And that's true, but it is changing rapidly. We're seeing massive shift towards automation and digitization. We're seeing enormous changes in terms of the ability of people to participate in the workforce remotely from mining operations in a meaningful way. We're seeing really significant shifts in terms of technological developments around some of the most significant challenges facing the industry. And so I think as an opportunity space for young professionals, mining is an extraordinary space to focus your energies and attentions. The other thing I would say is, if you're in the geotechnical space or in the engineering space, do not for one moment think that your life will not be touched by sustainability issues. And of course I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I work for an organization that's dedicated to advancing sustainability within the sector. But, give you a case in point. I was down at the IBRAM conference in Brazil a couple of weeks back. Now, if you go back 5 years ago, typically a conference like IBRAM would have focused an awful lot on probably geological prospects. It might have focused, there have been panels on specific minerals of interest and opportunities around Brazil. There have been panels that were very, very much kind of focused on kind of core business of mining with a little bit of sustainability sprinkled in almost as an add-on. Whereas this felt to me much, much more like a sustainability conference with a bit of technical stuff on the side. And I think that is a reflection of increasingly there is an indivisible connection between mining and the broader aspects of sustainability I described, whether that's in the environment area, the social performance area, or the governance and transparency area, or innovation. So we see tremendous opportunity, we see tremendous shortages in specific areas. And I'll give you just one really live example of this. A number of years back in early 2019, we had this tragic event in Brumadinho in Brazil, which saw the collapse of a tailings storage facility, which sadly killed 270 people. To the extent that that awful event had a silver lining, it did lead to the creation of a global industry standard on tailings management. And that global industry standard has with it a set of obligations and responsibilities that fall on companies and a set of professions that are integral and essential to delivering on that. And we've seen probably for the first time in my history in the industry, and this goes back over 35 years now, we've seen the role and the standing of tailings management professionals move from a marginal concern to something that is absolutely on the minds of, and indeed on the lips of, board members and executive committees within companies. And I think that illustrates both the potential within the sector, but also the extent to which some of these issues that may have been thought of as almost marginal until recently becoming utterly mainstream and fundamental to delivering on core business and successful mining of the future.
Thank you, Aidan. I'd like to use that as a springboard for the sort of next talking point. Millennials, it is said, is a generation of values-driven people. And it's often suggested that the mining sector doesn't fit or share those values. And I strongly disagree with that, because the mining sector, from what I've seen and the companies I've spoken with, are very values driven. And I want to bring in Clive here. We're talking about some of, sustainability, environmental aspects, things of that nature. Obviously, performance and technology and approach has changed over the time, but the mining company of today is very different from the mining company of 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and the historical paradigm or perception of miners as being, guys with picks that just destroy the environment. And I want to bring in Clive here because B2Gold is a relatively young company, and it's done some very, very impressive work and things in Africa and other places. And I want to sort of pick up on a couple of things recently. B2Gold is not just a mining company. You could also argue it's an energy company because of its deployment of solar generation capacity in Africa. And it's done a lot of work to help protect various aspects of the environment in Africa. And I'd like to bring in here, Clive, the Rhino Bar. Why don't you start off telling us about the Rhino Bar, what its aims were, what it's done, and then sort of broaden that into sort of the broader sustainability approach of B2Gold, please.
Let's talk about it. I'd like to go back just a little bit, if it's okay, and talk just briefly about echoing a lot of what Aidan and Catherine said. I mean, I couldn't agree more about we need to inspire the millennials by showing it that it's not the boring industry and the somewhat irresponsible industry that it was in the past. And I think that, you know, we touched a bit about and heard everyone's education. I didn't neglected to point out that my education, I was 2 years into an arts degree at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, and the decision point came with Beam Industries, this contracting company. In my early 20s, we were growing really rapidly, so I had to decide to stay with the company or go back and finish my arts degree. I'm still waiting to go back to finish my arts degree. So I think that I might have made the right call. But the point to make there with the millennials, I've approached this business from very much not. I think it's an advantage to not be an engineer, a geologist, a lawyer, a financial person, and a mining engineer. I think it's been a great advantage if you earn the trust of the people and you have great people working to you and you listen to them. Because no one goes out of a meeting that we have all the time, our executive meetings every week, and no one sits there and goes, "Oh, typical Clive the geologist backs the geologist," or "Clive the engineer." I've always said that as long as I'm around, exploration will never report to the mining engineer. I think that's a terrible business model. But so I make the point of we need to inspire millennials, and we've had a history of being, some would say, contrarian, some would say risk takers, but it's measured risks. But I think we need to inspire people. If you look at my career from a line cutter and a claim staker to where we are and what we've done and what I've done, and traveled all over the world and changed people's lives, 5,000 employees today. So I think that's been the principle, breaking down the silos, trying to get geologists and engineers to realize they need each other and they need to work together with the environmental, with everyone. So I think Catherine touched on a lot of great points there that I completely agree with. So we need to inspire millennials. And I think people like Peter, as he's been saying, benefit from perhaps the bit of the B2Gold approach, which is you're open, you can learn everything, you're included. We're so inclusive. And I think that's why we have such an incredible executive team and management at the mines, because you can progress in the company. We need to show people this is not your grandfather's mining company. And I think we have a lot of work to do there, and that's going to be publicity, et cetera. So specifically to the kind of things that we do, once again, thinking outside the box, approaching this idea, well, why isn't mining an industry where everyone wins? You know, stakeholders all win, the governments, the local people, the shareholders win, and why doesn't everybody win? And that's always been the principle and the strategy behind the BIMA and B2Gold going back all these years. The Rhino gold coin was something that I immediately just thought, what a great idea. So we were trying to find ways to support the communities in which we work, and I became intrigued by the Black Rhino. The only place that roams free in the world now is northern Namibia. And the towns there are working hard the rangers working hard to help patrol and save these animals from poaching. So in 2015, there was 9 rhinos poached in Namibia. And in 2016, there was 90 rhinos poached in Namibia. And the real factor that happened there, the truth is, the Chinese came in to build a uranium mine. And they didn't do what we did. They didn't train Namibians as they were supposed to in the agreement with government. They brought in a lot of Chinese workers, etc. The bottom line is that caused an explosion in the slaughter of rhinos for their horns, which has the same value as your fingernail. So whatever they may think in their ancient medical practices, it's all bullshit. At the end of the day, they're just destroying the animals. So someone came to this idea: what can we do? How do we support the local communities and help those communities help save the black rhino? So somebody came with this idea about what about using gold? So we took 1,000 ounces of gold from the Ojokoro mine in Namibia that had been deposited 4 billion years ago by an exploding star. And we took 1,000 ounces of the gold and we gave it to the Save the Rhino Trust, which we're a big part of. And we made these beautiful bars. You've seen them, Paul. I think you have one, Paul. We made these beautiful bars of 1 ounces and bigger bars with the rhino and a cub on one side. And on the other side, it's not cubs, the rhino and a small rhino on one side, and on the other side, the mountains of Namibia. And we sold these at a premium as a collector's item, and they are. That's it. It's a limited edition of what we did. So we raised $1.7 million US, which is a lot in somewhere like here, to support the community in helping to save the rhinos, and we've had 0 poaching incidents in that area where we are. So that's the kind of thing, and I just love that kind of innovative thinking, outside the box thinking that I apply to the industry, but applying that as well to things like that. So there's a number of examples. There's some great videos and stuff on our website about, you know, rebuilding coral reefs in the Philippines, where we didn't destroy the reefs, but others did, and just some of the outside the box thinking. But it's all about, primarily it's about community education, healthcare, and all those things. And you mentioned solar power. That's something we're very proud of. We were first movers in Namibia, the first mining company to build a solar plant. Now we have a much bigger one in Mali, and that will continue. So yeah, I think I'd like to think it's an example of entrepreneurial thinking in an industry that too often has been pretty staid, pretty boring, and not always really responsible, and not very communicative, not very transparent. So that's some of the way we approach these things.
Thank you very much, Clyde. I'd like to sort of broaden on that to say modern mining very often in many parts of the world, it embraces mining is very good at deploying resources, deploying expertise, and project management. And in many parts of the world, miners are willing to take on existing environmental liabilities caused by others, and to make the world physically a better place by repairing environmental damage. Clive mentioned some things that B2 Gold's been doing with the coral reefs. In other parts of the world, for example, Perpetual Resources in Idaho is looking to repair historical damage to recreate fish habitats. And there's many other examples of this that we could cite. And that also means that mining companies increasingly need environmental engineers, water engineers, hydrologists, all these other disciplines, including oceanographers now. I'd like to sort of bring in Catherine on this point about some of the sort of the bigger, broad impacts that mining companies can have, you know, beyond digging a hole in the ground. You're a director of many different mining companies. What kinds of things are you seeing, and are you advising the companies about in this regard?
Yeah, really interesting discussion by Clive, and one of the things, because I think this ties to the whole millennials piece, is the one thing to remember, that our social environment, that whether you're living in it or people in first-year university who are just out of high school are living in it, is a world where we still are influenced by a couple of things that I think are fairly negative in trying to do some of the things that we're trying to do. And that is the silly mining shows on TV where they run around with fire hoses and pumps and get, excavators stuck in swamps. And so, if that is the legacy we're battling, and that is entertainment, and first of all, I don't know how these people aren't charged, but I mean, to me, these are the kinds of uphill battles that we have. And I would say the others are, the whole trying to get young women to entertain the idea of going into the mining world, in a world where if you walk into your local Joe Fresh or something, everything for the girls is in pink. And so we are fighting, even in first world examples, we're fighting an uphill battle in some cases. And so I just wanted to sort of say that the burning issues, I think there's a lot more opportunity for two reasons. But one of the biggest issues we're still dealing with is the whole concept around inclusion. It's around, and Clive touched on this around as well, is around ensuring that local people are engaged, whether it be Indigenous people in wherever, but certainly we have lots of examples in Canada and also in other parts of the world, ensuring that they have the opportunity to be our future managers in whatever piece of the mining space or the mine in specific examples. So I think the whole concept about human management, HR, the old HR or people, I think that's going to be huge, because we're already in a talent crunch in almost every subdiscipline. And we also have to, and so that is a burning question. with all four of my public companies, that certainly is on the front burner. And I would also say, as the changing regulatory environment, it is changing every week. And some of these things are good, but I think it's been very difficult to keep up with it. There's so much overlap, and trying to understand who should be talking to whom is difficult. So, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but it is the reality that we're faced with. I would say the other reality is, and there are examples, other than B2 where companies are affecting change, and there's more and more of these. They tend to be mid-tier and larger, especially the mid-tiers where they can be a bit more nimble, and I think B2 is an excellent example of that. And I think in some of the smaller companies, especially when we get into some of the junior space or into the smaller companies that might be trying to build something or bring something forward, I think there are a lot of financing issues. It's very difficult to finance with new ideas in the mining space. And I think that limits us. And I think that's where the major companies can help out by, let's say, really working seriously on a problem, let's say, like taking your surface infrastructure and putting it underground if you have an underground mine. There's no reason why you have to crush rocks on surface, right? So, those kinds of things, I think those things are really becoming burning questions. The low-hanging fruit, really, really simple. Energy, and Clive touched on the whole solar thing. A lot of companies are doing that in the Atacama Desert. This is, prime location, but, one of the companies I'm with, we're taking to the Eastern Desert in Egypt. And so the other, and everything right from different types of grinding technologies, like the CAM project at Rethink Mining Ventures, for example, to lower that energy footprint of mills. Crushing up rocks takes a lot of energy. And so energy is one of the bits of low-hanging fruit. And the other one I would say is water management. There's a lot more in the form of recycling that we have to be doing. It's not just a question of should be doing. We have to be doing, especially because water resources in some parts of the world with climate change are being so heavily impacted. So I think these are two of the things certainly that we consider sort of low-hanging fruit in some of the in the four public companies that I'm working with. But I do some advisory work in more junior companies, and that's an uphill battle. They don't have the finances in some cases. The consultants or the contractors they might use, like drill contractors, for example, don't have really aren't being forced or taking any of that on. So I think we've got a lot of work to do there.
Thank you, Catherine. One of the sort of takeaways I have from this section is that mining companies, particularly in the developing world, are effectively regional development companies. They have to think about things such as energy provision, water provision. They can help provide health services, infrastructure. All of this is predicated on a mine being present for the greater benefit of the region. And companies like B2 Gold certainly seem to adopt this approach towards their projects and their development, and can see this elsewhere. I'm based in Latin America. I can see this throughout Latin America. We're rapidly running out of time, so I want to move on to the next talking point and bring in Peter here. We've been talking about sort of mining, and many people think it's quite staid, quite boring, not very exciting. Everybody wants to go into technology. And again, I want to counter that and say mining is at the cutting edge of many, many technological developments and advances, and is a very quick, very much an early adopter of things. Automation, innovation, artificial intelligence. Mining is using these and has been using these for a number of years. One of the current paradigms is decarbonisation. Humanity needs to decarbonise its activity. The mining sector, again, is at the forefront of this, both in terms of decarbonising its mines, but also in terms of providing the materials that humanity needs to do this. So I'd like to bring in Peter here to talk about technology and innovation. What are some of the things you've been personally involved with, and what are some of the other things you see out there in the mining sector that your colleagues and peers are engaged with?
Yep, thank you, Paul. Yeah, first I'd like to loop back, and I'll get right to that. But speaking directly to the younger audience, these questions that they're asking of the industry, and most industries now, they're not unfair questions. These are questions that should be answered and should be taken into account. I mean, what is our impact on the land? What is our impact on the people? What is our impact on the future? Is this sustainable? Those are good questions, and I'm proud to say that the mining industry is not what it was 40, 50 years ago. It is a more responsible industry now, and some of that is from our shareholders. Some of it is from younger people coming into the mining industry, and a lot of it is, this is what society requires of us. And so it's exciting to be at the front of that. Specific to technology, what's happening now is technology is no longer a showpiece or a display piece. We're at the point now where, in mining at least, these technologies have been part of our everyday toolbox. And you talk about autonomous vehicles just now really starting to be part of the greater society and your public streets. We've had autonomous vehicles in the mining space, which is a controlled environment, for close to a decade now. Autonomous drill rigs, I would say that most modern mines have some form of autonomy, in the drilling space, and we're moving to that in haulage, in excavators, dozers, everything else. So autonomous vehicles, yeah, that's not new technology. It's a tool. You look at things like drones. We fly drones through our underground mine workings and survey with lasers. Again, this is not science fiction. This isn't a proposed study. This is done every day as a matter of course. And in the mining space, one of the advantages it has is it is a controlled environment. So as a mining group, we can take advantage of this. And over the past 10 to 15 years as an industry, we have. It's good business is really the truth of it. So to be a responsible, profitable mining company these days is to be at the cutting edge of technology and research, automation, artificial intelligence. And to me, that's one thing that is very interesting. Another one is battery electric vehicles. B2Gold right now has some development projects on the horizon, and some of them we are now designing it specifically for battery electric vehicles from the beginning. And that's something, it's not a retrofit. And that's something that a lot of industries don't have the ability to do. And mining is, we have that ability, and it's part of our toolbox.
Thank you, Peter. I think it's safe to say the mine of tomorrow or 20 years down the track is going to be very different from the mines of today. We're pretty much out of time, so Peter, I'd like to thank Aidan Davy, Clive Johnson, Peter Montano, and Catherine Farrow for joining us and participating in this panel today.